Hello there and welcome everybody. BLS014 show and tell today with Brian Love. Brian, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Great. Good to have you here. Today we're going to talk about lookout.dev.
Okay.
But maybe for those of you that don't know you, you can tell a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what got you into coding.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's fun. My name is Brian Love, and I'm mostly focused on Angular, though I do a lot of React and Node as well. I've got, I think, about 16 years professional experience so far. So I went kind of the traditional route, through college. When I came out of high school in 2001, boot camps didn't exist, and you had some opportunity just to self-start into programming. But it was pretty clear to me, certainly in terms of trying to get a programming job, that, hey, I'm going to have to go through this, computer science program. So I've been doing web development ever since. Kind of got through the program, got an internship at a local college doing web development actually with Cold Fusion, which you may remember from way back in the day, and then kind of progressed from there. And yeah, so I'm a Google developer expert in Angular and web technologies. I enjoy blogging and teaching and speaking and honestly just sharing things that I learn, and hopefully making it easier for people as they're getting into programming and such. And why did I first get into programming? So I was the kid in like 1995 on like GeoCities, like putting the under construction sign on the page and all of that. And so I just thought it was really fascinating, like the idea of creating something. I do think programming is a creative outlet, right? I mean, it's not drawing or painting or something, but we're building things, we're creating things on the screen. And I remember just the first time writing some basic HTML, and I was like, this is really fascinating to me. And of course, JavaScript back then was not much of a trade, right? JavaScript was just kind of like grab a snippet, throw it in, and it does what you need it to do. So that's how I kind of got started. So I think technically I was like 12 or 13 years old when I first started like playing with web browser and like view source and all of that. Yeah. But then since then I've just really enjoyed it as a career and also kind of as a hobby as well. So.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So you've been around quite a bit. Yeah. I remember definitely GeoCities. When I was younger, I thought it was JoCities because I didn't have any reference to, I didn't have any other people that spoke English to me. Yeah, I definitely remember that time. And I think one of the interesting things you mentioned, the view source or the view sourceability of the websites at this moment, because everything was like HTML,
public, right?
Servers, and that was the thing. And like maybe there were some sites that used CGI to dynamically generate stuff, but in general, most pages would be a page on a server and you could inspect everything. And
and I think I'd go to like other sites and be like, oh, that's cool, view source, and kind of look where it is and kind of maybe copy paste it over into mine and see how it works. And I mean, we didn't have these, and I'm not knocking the complexity of the modern stacks and development, but we didn't have compilers and bundlers and all of this tooling and infrastructure, which is all good. But it was a different time, that's all. But it was fun just being able to poke around in somebody else's, just view source, and there it was. So it was cool.
Maybe sometime in the future we can do a session about looking back at how sites were built back in the days for all the millennials that are joining us that are not aware, with all respect. I think starting out today is way easier. You can get way better results quicker and like build more interesting stuff.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, just the frameworks that we have are incredibly powerful. And there's also a lot of great resources, maybe transitioning into the kind of the learning in public and lookout.dev. I think there's a lot of great resources out there. You've got, I mean, just sites like Egghead, you've got tons of, tutorials and content and YouTube and all of these things. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity, which is all phenomenal. So that way we can kind of reduce those barriers to entry, get more people into programming and get interested in it, maybe not necessarily as a career, but something that's a fun thing to do. So
Definitely. Yeah, I agree also that it's like a form of art. It might not be as expressive as making a painting
Right.
or
Yeah.
writing a song, but I definitely feel it myself, and I think it kind of tickles some creative part of your brain. So
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, totally agree. Cool. So you also have a passion for teaching and sharing your knowledge, and is this why you came up with your new project?
Yeah. So maybe a little history on the project. So I kind of had it's kind of transitioned and pivoted a little bit over the last. I actually started it about a year ago, just kind of hacking away at it. And the original idea that I kind of came up with, and maybe it was more than a year, because I think I shared it with like some people at NGConf in person in 2019. I remember hanging out with like Mike Ryan and a couple other people. And I was like, I think I got this like idea of this thing I want to build. And the idea was originally like an inverse of Stack Overflow, right? So Stack Overflow is a phenomenal resource, but you post a question and then you get answers. And I was like, well, what if there was a website out there where you could basically post an answer or a solution? And that's kind of where it all kind of started, with this idea of like, it's not blogging, it's not a Q&A forum, right? But it's something new where you can take small bite-sized chunks of things that you learn in your job or on a side project or in school or in a boot camp, take that and just break it down quickly and easily, and also give you a little bit of guidelines around it. So
Correct.
when you create a lookout, and I can show you on my screen, but you have like a title and a description, you can tag it. And then from there, if you want, you can provide some more context around like instructions, maybe things to do, things to avoid, why you might do things, and things you might consider, right?
Right.
And then you can have code blocks. And then the code blocks are specifically like, do this or don't do this. So kind of like a style guide. You might see sometimes in a style guide, it'll have like a bad example, and it's like, this is the bad way to do it. And then here's like the correct way to do it. And so I wanted to provide a little bit of structure around it, make it easy for people to share what they learn and kind of put it out there and make it available publicly.
Very cool. I remember hearing about it 3 times in a row on the same day, which eventually made me sign up, because that's how it works, right?
Nice, good.
I think it got mentioned in the normal office hours that I often try to watch. It got mentioned in
Okay.
Zach Rose stream, Zach's
Yep.
Rose ZLS, which is
Yep.
also the inspiration for BLS, at least the name, and also he is a person doing lives. And
Yep.
then I saw you on the Angular Discord, which is also shameless plug. Angular Discord, if you're working with Angular, not on the Discord, be there or be square. That's basically the thing. It's super interesting. But I saw it mentioned as well there. And this is, I think, where I say, hey, this is the third time I see it. I just got to
Yeah, I should go take a look. That's cool. I'm glad to hear. Yeah.
And I shared my first one, I think yesterday or the day before, about something I used a lot in Docker, and which was actually an unintended learning in public, because it was a snippet I had on Gist from GitHub, which is some Docker commands that clean up your Docker environment. Because if you run a lot of containers, your disk gets full and Docker starts behaving weird. And I shared this with a colleague like 4 years back, and I never really looked at it until I found that you can star on gist.github. I didn't know. And I checked what was my most starred thing, and I figured I had like 190 stars in this thing. So I was like, okay, this is cool.
Oh, wow.
People were
That's
commenting on it, and I never realized it. I never interacted with them.
Yeah.
Then I was like, okay, this is a nice candidate to put on Lookout.dev and basically formalize my public learning with this little snippet. So
Nice. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you contributing. Yeah, I saw that. That was good. And I think, I mean, we're in the early days, if you will. You know, I just kind of launched this, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago. But also another one got posted today, which was really cool. Preston Lamb posted about purging Tailwind, CSS from your app using, it uses the Angular CLI, but I thought that was really cool that he shared that. So.
Yeah, awesome. Preston was on the show before you, BLS014.
Oh, cool.
Preston
Nice.
Lamb, and we talked about deploying apps from an NX monorepo, multiple apps from one repo, deploying them in an efficient way. So definitely check that out if you're interested in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, very cool.
So yeah, everybody go to lookout.dev, create an account, and start learning in public. And I'd say let's look at your screen. So today, Brian will drive, and there won't be navigation because he will navigate as well. So I'll just ask questions as and
Cool.
when they come around. I'll take a look at chat. I'm still kind of new. Hey, David is here. David, hey, David.
Hey, David.
Nice to see you here. That's awesome. So yeah, I'm still relatively new to streaming, so I have to take into account chat. And as always, my connection might break, but that's also that's why we do this live.
Okay, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Did you want me to talk about the stack at all, or did you want me to get right into kind of sharing, do a demo first or something?
Let's share your screen, because I don't think it's shared right now.
Yep, let me do that. Share.
If you share it, we can both take a look, and we'll move to the bottom here. And then, yeah, it would be great if you could give a small demo of what it is and some of the things. What I really liked is the structure you provide with the do's and the don'ts, or the avoid and the do's. And then, yeah, I think let's take a look at the stack, some design choices you make. If you want to show us the repo or the project, maybe some features you have in mind, things that were complicated. So just let's see where we go from there.
Okay, cool. So right now I'm sharing, actually, this is my local development. So I'm using the Firebase emulator suite locally. So this might look a little different. If I come over here and go to like the home page, there's a couple more additional lookouts that have been posted since I last just kind of brought the data in from Firestore. And so I'm obviously using Firebase for the hosting and Firestore for the persistence of data. Authentication is also through Firebase, and then rules around securing of the data, and of course functions around when basically hooks into the database, as well as serving it's a SSR, so it's server-side rendered Angular application. So right off the bat, right here's the homepage. Basically, I'm just listing out all of the most recent lookouts that have been posted, and then there's some simple pagination down at the bottom. I might eventually do infinite scroll, but just kind of starting small with the project. And then we've got tags based on kind of the popularity, and then some just brief links on the right. But if we come into one of them, let's see, I think I want to share mine that I wrote about SVG favicons. And so I attended and helped organize a conference called Cascadia JS, which is traditionally located in the Pacific Northwest here in the States, and focused at JavaScript full stack. So, Dino, Node, and then, frameworks, general vanilla JavaScript and stuff. And one of the talks that was given by Tiger Oaks, it was a simple thing, honestly, but like new to me. I was like, I have always, so like for favicons on a browser, maybe just skip down here to the don't. This is what my favicons looked like, right? Yeah. So, I would generate out from Sketch, 8 files or 10 files or whatever it is, because you've got like your small, your big, your high res, you've got your iPad, your tablet, you've got your, all these different sizes, right? And he did a talk, and part of the talk was on this, not the entire talk. He talked about several other things like maskable icons and such, and I would encourage you to check out the talk. But one of the things that I learned that was pretty, I don't want to say simple, but I was like, oh, duh. So it's actually, there's broad support by browsers these days for just a single SVG favicon, right? So you don't need to have 20 files anymore or whatever it is, and all of this HTML in your head. And so you could just simply have basically a single SVG favicon, and as we know, it's a vector graphic, and so it's going to scale as necessary. Of course, if you've got older browsers, maybe like IE 9, 10, and 11 or something like that, they're not going to support it, but certainly modern browsers do. And so when I learned this, I was like, oh, this is really neat. I just learned something. What if I share it out and make it public? And so I just wrote up a quick thing, so here's the description of it. And obviously there's some formatting of, the HTML or JavaScript or whatever, kind of pre-formatted. I talk a little bit about the, browser support and, web clipping around like Apple Touch icons. And then here's where you get into instructions. And I basically added 2 different instructions. I said so you do want to specify the sizes attribute with the value of any for the SVG favicon. I think that's kind of critical if you miss that. And you might want to consider including some low and high res PNGs for older browsers that don't support
Right.
it. And then here's my code example. So basically, the kind of the green and red, I think it works mostly, I think that communicates pretty clearly like, hey, here's what you should do. And this is what you probably shouldn't do. Not that you can't, but this is kind of like a recommendation. And then after that, you've got a little bio that you can enter. You can click the link to kind of see somebody's page. And then I've got, comments that you can add to the page. And so pretty simple and easy. Again, I've chatted with a bunch of people about this, and some people are like, it's kind of like microblogging. And I think maybe that's one way to think about it. But the key takeaway is I want to make it easy for people to learn in public. If you learn something, I think you've got two choices. You can either learn in private, and there's nothing wrong with learning in private, but you're on the job, you're coding up something in your boot camp or for school or for work, and you got to figure something out, and you learn about it, and you're like, okay, got it. Got that PR done, boom, on to the next thing, and that's fine. But I do think that there's a distinct advantage if you learn something, if you then take a little bit of time, turn around and share it, make it public. And I think you're going to see things like, I think it can boost your career. I think you're going to learn from yourself, both past and present. I couldn't tell you how many times I've gone to my own blog post 6 months later and been like, oh yeah, that's right. That's what I did. And so it's a good way of just like, kind of collecting things that you learn. And so I really do think there's a distinct advantage to learning in public. And so that's why I wanted to build this. And so it's pretty easy to sign in. I'm already signed in, obviously. But if I just sign out, you could sign in. And, this is all supported by Firebase. I just chose these three. I think this is most relevant, especially for developers, GitHub, Twitter, Google account. You can also sign up with your email. And then once you're in, then you can start sharing what you learn.
Very, very cool. I totally agree with learning in public is a good thing. I think in general, and this is something I feel to do, I've also been around, I've worked since 99 professionally in computers, and like from 2009, I've been a coder. There's so many things I knew at some point and I just forgot how to do it, or forgot the details, and I had to look it up again. And I've been aware of this for years. And there's I think a big difference into sharing a blog where you want to think about grammar and think about like having a coherent story and maybe some additional content like a repo with a demo. This all takes a lot of time. And having maybe, I think minimal is like 3 or 4 fields. If you click the share knowledge button, this is super accessible with that in regards. Like it's the title, it's a description and a tag.
Yeah.
And I think with that, you can basically be done.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very, very approachable way. And when I saw this, I was like, okay, this might work for me as some sort of external memory, if you will, where I just dump stuff that I'd learned. And very cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you can start coding along here or do whatever, I don't know, just messing around here.
Yeah.
But once you add you just kind of add a description. You can have some code in here. You don't have to have code in here. And so this is just a markdown editor. And then you can add some tags. So, if it's JavaScript, you can come in here and select a specific tag. The related answers, I kind of added this feature, but I don't think it's real intuitive. But the idea here is if it's related to another lookout, you could put, kind of punch that in. And then here's where you can add instructions. So you can choose whether it's something to avoid, consider, do, or why. So you could bring in avoid and kind of and you can add multiple, as you can see, and kind of get rid of them if you want to, and all of that. And then for rules, this is where if you want to, you can link to an ESLint or a TSLint rule if this is something related to that. And then you can also add, here's your code examples, where you can add maybe a code example to avoid, choose the language, maybe give it a title, and then here's your code block. And then the same with maybe something to do. And you can have multiple of those as well. And then you can save it as a draft, or you can go ahead and publish it.
Very, very cool. Yeah. So it's a very low barrier way of sharing knowledge. And the way I kind of see it, it's ideal for things that, well, you learned today and you don't want to forget. You want to share with other people. And I think that's a very, very great thing and very useful.
Yeah, and to be fair, like I certainly support people that are or not support, but like if you're already got a blog and you're blogging, awesome. Keep doing it. Keep sharing that way. If you're speaking or teaching or mentoring or whatever it is, like these are all phenomenal ways to learn in public. And there's nothing wrong with those. It's just I thought this would be something a little unique, kind of reduce the barriers, make it easier. And yeah, and then you get to share it out with the community, and people can kind of see what other people are learning. So yeah.
Yeah, very cool. I also see the term here, digital garden, which is something I see on Twitter quite a bit. I know Joel from Egghead is somebody that talks
Mhm.
about this a lot.
Yep.
There's even an explanation about it. I should check it out. I didn't check this out specifically. Can you tell a little bit about what the idea behind the digital garden is?
Yeah. So I completely all like I love what Sean and Joel talk about. I mean, I think they're probably, for me anyways, two people in the JavaScript community that kind of evangelize this concept. And so this idea of like this digital garden is basically, you learn something, and you can kind of curate your knowledge over time. I don't think, and I've kind of said this, to some of my friends and stuff, the idea of learning in public or building a digital garden is, I don't think the right approach. This is my personal opinion, and you can disagree. But I don't think the approach to learning in public is such to receive accolades or likes or digital emojis or tacos or whatever it is that you might get. Probably inherently have little to no value. But I don't think that that's the purpose of it, right? The purpose of learning in public and kind of cultivating your digital garden and sharing what you learn is for yourself and for others. And it's a way to kind of communicate out and be open and transparent with what you're learning, right? And so the idea of a digital garden is, start small. Start with something, like what you did. I love it. It's a great example. You've got some gists out there. Maybe they've got a bunch of stars on them. Or maybe you learned something and you post it on Twitter, or maybe you learned something and you post it in a Slack channel. And again, nothing's wrong with that. I think some of those are kind of short-lived, or like if I post something on Twitter with a bunch of code, and I love these, I do, like people post them and I'm like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Like,
Yeah,
oh, of
yeah,
course,
yeah,
or whatever. But the problem is within an hour, it's gone, right? Or within a day, it's gone. If you post it in your work Slack channel, maybe you have like an engineering Slack channel, or you have like a learning Slack channel or something like that. It's private, right? It's not publicly out there. And so the idea of a digital garden is curating, sharing, building, and growing what you learn and doing it in public, and making it publicly available and making it like persistent, right? So it's not something that's short-lived, where you just post it on Twitter and then, by the next day, it's pretty much gone. Sure, it's in your timeline, but even then, if I go to like even my own timeline and I start scrolling back, there's so much other stuff in there, it's hard to find it. And then the other thing that's really key also, I think, about, a digital garden or a blog or something like that is search, right? And so you should be able to have, high discoverability. So if there's something in specifically that I'm looking for, maybe around the favicons, kind of keep it in line with that. Let's make it easy to make that knowledge discoverable. And so whether you have your own blog or you use lookout.dev or whatever you do, I think making it public and making it discoverable, and so people can easily find it, I think those are kind of high criteria for at least me personally.
Very cool. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I really love the explanation about cultivating your digital garden and putting it out there. And yeah, I think I can definitely see this being a useful tool for a lot of people in our community, probably outside the Angular community as well. And yeah, super. Maybe we can take a look at how you build. You said you're using all Firebase.
Yep.
Or is there other parts of the stack?
No, so it is basically all Firebase. So I mean, some people use the word like bootstrapping or whatever, but I mean, I'm building this all out in my own personal time. And so, something like this, I wanted to I didn't want to have to stand up servers or databases, or Postgres or, Python backend or whatever it might be. I just wanted to have kind of a quick and easy way to get started. And really it was just kind of an idea, certainly, to begin with. So like I mentioned, authentication handle is all through Firebase. I'm using Firestore for all, storing of comments. I think I originally called the lookouts rules. So you'll see that they're called rules. But so I have like comments and, the languages for when you choose a language for a code block. I store some metadata about each of the rules and comments. There's the rules themselves, tags, users, and then tracking votes. So if you upvote or downvote a particular lookout. I'm not using real-time database. And then, hosting, of course, for the static assets. And then a bunch of functions as, like I mentioned, basically database hooks, as well as for doing server-side rendering for SEO, and then also building out a sitemap for Google. And so that was something that was pretty important to me from the beginning of the project. Was I wanted to use Angular because I like it and I use it pretty frequently. I could have gone with something like Gatsby or even like Remix Run. Now looks very cool. But what's that?
Next.js for
or Next.js.
It's definitely a valid option.
Yeah, absolutely. But when I started this is just kind of what I did. And so I did want to make sure that the SEO is here. And so if you're going to, again, in the same idea of like discoverability, if this was all just, client side rendered, it's very difficult for that to be discovered through, Googlebot and search engines. And so all of the pages, if I come back here and let's say I go here, now if I look at the source code, you're going to see, that's not the source code window. I always forget what the key shortcut is for source code. J, thank you.
Command Alt J. Command Shift U.
I wanted to see just the source code. Is it Command
Option U, I think it is.
I'm not. Why is it not working for me? Come on. There we go. Thanks. Appreciate it, Bram. So right here, obviously, so I'm also using a service worker, so it's running a service worker. So you're going to see right here is just the client side rendered application. But if I just do like a hard reload on this, right there's your server side rendered. So that way Google is getting and is able to see all of the content. I'm also doing, I've kind of had a bit of a specialty in my past around SEO and some of my previous work. And so, I'm using like schema. There's also like, there's schema.org. I've got the data JSON D or whatever it is to describe all of the data on the page to make it discoverable, by Google, to read all of that. And then one of the other things I kind of created that I thought was pretty fun is whenever you create or update your lookout, I actually have a Firebase function that's going to run that generates out a PNG so if you share like your lookout on Twitter, you're going to notice that you get this nice card, and that card is actually generated like dynamically using like Node and Canvas to generate out a nice looking card. So that way, when if you do, you kind of share this out on Twitter. Let's see if I pull this up. Let's see. Preston just had one. Maybe if I can find it here. Or let's see, maybe it was, did I tweet it out? Let's see. Yeah, here's Preston's. And so you get this nice image and card. And so I wanted to have it, again, this idea of like, making it easy for people to kind of share it out and also, get the SEO love and all of that. So I did try to put a little effort into it more than just, create a simple app and throw it out there and see what happens. So hopefully these little touches will be a good thing for the discoverability and for the use of it.
Very cool. Very cool. And I see this. I recognize the server app state, which is the last line, basically hydrating the front end when it comes back.
Yep.
the dynamic logo should be linked here somewhere as well, I assume. So there should be some
Yeah,
PNG.
what is that OG image right here? So here I use, I'm using, of course, Firebase, but also, Google Cloud, which they're basically kind of one and the same, right? So I've got, a directory that I just drop these into and generate out the JPEG every time you update the title or when you first create the lookout, which requires a title. So I generate that out as well. Yep.
Very cool. And yeah, awesome. I think it looks like you put in a lot of effort in these kind of details, which I think can make a project, how do you call it? Make it or break it, actually. Because if you stuff it in there, you can't find it. It's probably not the right place to share your knowledge.
Right. Yeah. You want to make sure that other people can find it, through Google or whatever it is. And so that's really important. Yeah. And I'm glad you pointed out, especially for Angular developers, I guess hydrating, I forget, it's called Angular transfer state, right? I think is the service. And so all the data that's getting rendered server side, once that comes into the client side, it doesn't have to go and hit Firestore to get that data and render it. It's right there and available. And so I actually wrote a blog article on my personal blog, I think before Lookout was up, and I kind of shared how I did this. I actually wrote up kind of a service around the Angular service in order to do it for me, a little bit trickier, if you will, or a little bit easier for me. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out too.
Very cool. We'll share it in the description. I'm keeping notes of what we should share. Otherwise, my YouTube person will be mad at me that I don't share. Share blog about transfer state. Yeah, awesome. So yeah, for those of you that they're not aware of server-side rendering, the part gets rendered on the server, gets pushed first, but after it still loads your SPA and it starts behaving as an SPA. And by default,
Correct.
If you don't transfer state, it will make the same call, basically duplicating your API requests, which is it's a waste of effort, but it also can trigger flashes on your screen where it's user experience is not optimal. And yeah, it's basically a waste of effort while you already have the data. So from this point, it looks
you've already. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was about to say from this point on, it looks super complete. So awesome.
Yeah. So, I think, I feel like it was a good start. I was a little I even talking to my wife and stuff, I was like, we'll see what happens. I've been working on this, I think I had the idea at NGConf. So that would have been April of last year. It's December, so it's more than a year and a half later. And I just kind of toyed around with it. My wife and I also took 3 months to travel around Europe and the United States last year. So I didn't get much work done on it when we were traveling. And then I just kind of been picking it back up, with some of the extra time here, as we're all living in a little bit more isolation than we're used to. Mm-hmm. I was like, yeah, I'm going to get this thing and I'm going to actually get it done, not done, but I'm going to get it out there. I'm going to make something and push it out there. And so I've been really pleased, honestly, with the feedback that I've gotten. I've gotten some great suggestions from people, oh, this isn't quite good, or change this. But I've also got some general feedback from people, and they just think it's a really cool idea. So it's certainly reaffirming to hear that, when you spend, hours and hours and hours of your personal time, just kind of. But I did really enjoy building it, and I do enjoy working on it, and it's really been fun for me in the last month. I know that this is tiny compared to something I don't know, whatever, dev.2, which is a great thing. I'm not comparing this, but I'm getting maybe one every other day or something. But for me, I come and I look at this and I'm like, oh, cool, and check it out. And so it's been fun seeing what people are sharing and learning. So it's been really a joy for me to just kind of see people picking it up and saying, oh, this is cool. I like what you did. So. Yeah.
Awesome. What I like also, and it might be a coincidence, everybody that's on this page here has been on my show or is on the show right now, which is you, Preston, Alex, Ciao, Ciao Tran. And then Zach DeRose, who is definitely, he's one of the inspirations for doing this. So he'll definitely be on here soon, hopefully. And then this, I think I don't recognize.
Wojtek, or
No.
I'm not sure if I mispronounced that. I apologize, but he's in the Angular Discord, and I don't remember where he works, but yeah. So he's posted a couple, and then Tom Eustace, I believe, is this gentleman's name. Yeah, Tom kind of posted a couple things for us. And then once you get far enough, you'll start to see that it's just me, which was me kind of just playing around with it. I think if you go all the way back, like my first one was from October of last year, when I actually had like the UI where I could post an actual lookout, and so so it's been a fun project. And certainly if anybody's watching and you've got feedback, or you've got some ideas about what else would be cool or neat, or even if it's critical feedback, I'm very open to hearing from you. My DMs are open on Twitter, and you can also email me at brian@liveloveapp.com. So feel free to reach out to me directly.
Awesome. Well, that's a great invitation. I see Freddie joined. He says, I'm a little late. Freddie, always welcome. It's good to see you here. Also, Freddie, I haven't seen you in the first list, so go make an account on Lookout.dev and share the awesome stuff. Freddie's also sharing his knowledge, writing blogs.
Cool.
He wrote a great article about Component Store from NGRX, so that's definitely something that would fit perfectly on Lookout.dev.
Nice.
So maybe we can switch gears and take a look at the project itself. I think a lot of people are interested in some of the design decisions the design decisions you made in terms of the code. So you have WebStorm, which is always welcome on this channel. I
do use WebStorm. I do use VS Code as well, and I think I still use VS Code usually when I do any sort of like speaking. Because I think a lot of people are using it in our community. WebStorm you certainly have to pay for. But the WebStorm has some features that are just hard, especially around like Git merging. It's hard to walk away from. I like VS Code, but WebStorm is also really great to use. Yeah. So
Freddie says he's on it, so that's good. We're going to have at least soon one more post there. So that's
nice.
Cool. So cool. So it's an Angular project, an AngularJS scaffolded project.
Yep. So we're using the Angular CLI, and let's see. I think I'm on Angular 10. I don't think I'm on Angular 11 yet. No. And I believe the reason for that is, so I'm using Angular Fire, obviously to work with Firebase just makes complete sense because it wraps the Firebase JS, SDK and provides observables. But it tends to be, has been my experience, and if I'm wrong, certainly correct me, but my experience has been sometimes Angular Fire lags a little bit behind like a fresh major out of Angular. And so I've run into problems where I'll upgrade to, Angular 10, for example, but then Firebase there's some weird edge cases maybe, or something that I'm, not doing right as well. And it just doesn't work. So I tend to be about a major behind. So I'm on Angular version 10, Angular Firebase, using a little bit of NGRX, though most of it is observables with Firebase. Here's your, universal. I'm using the Express engine, obviously, with a Firebase function for doing the server-side rendering. I am using the Angular CDK for some of the modals and stuff, but I didn't actually, I think I maybe started a while ago with Angular Material, but I like Angular Material, but I wanted to have my own look and feel. And Angular Material, you can certainly override the look and feel of it, but at some point, if you want your own look to a component or drop down or whatever it is, you've almost got to either wrap something, like NGX select or whatever, or use something like the CDK, to kind of give you, a well-positioned dialogue or modal. And so that's what I kind of, went with. Let me switch back to local. So things like modal dialogues and such. So if I come in here and I want to upload my photo, I just wanted this look. I like it. I don't know. But this is what I kind of went with, was a very square, kind of bold kind of look, with this kind of orange and deep purple kind of look and feel to it. And so I wrote a lot of, and maybe these were unnecessary, but it's kind of the side project right now. So if I come into like, I just threw them all and shared. I know that maybe I could have put them into each module appropriately. But I've got things like a dialogue, right? And a footer and a form field, or buttons, right? And so that way throughout the entire code base, all of the buttons are going to look the exact same, right? And so to some extent, I did a little extra, maybe, I don't want to call it maybe over engineering, but maybe a little more work than just using something like, and they're all great, Kendo UI or Progress or Ignite UI, Angular Material. I don't know, probably missing a dozen.
NC0, and there's a ton of them. And
NG0, I like that one. Yeah, I didn't actually know about that until recently. Maybe somebody on the Angular Show podcast mentioned it, and I was like, oh, I've not heard of this. But you'll see that they all have this kind of same look and feel, and I wanted to kind of make it so it didn't look like it was just thrown together. I did want it to come across very professional, and so that's why I ended up building out a lot of these kind of shared components, if you will. Also, you could knock me for this. I'm not using NX. I'm sorry. I probably should be, right?
At some point,
at some point, it probably will use NX, especially if I move to, if like you were mentioning, like an API, if I write like a Node API or something like that, I would definitely move it into NX. But for right now, it's just a single workspace or just generic, ng new project.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then,
go ahead.
So you didn't use any UI libraries at all? You wrote the CSS just from scratch? Everything.
I did. I know, I'm a madman. So
that's cool, man. I admire that.
Yeah. So I love Tailwind. And I do like the utility first aspect of it. But I just wanted to just roll it all myself, So I mean, if we come in, let's look at that button component maybe.
Yeah.
If we come into the button component, I'm using SAS or SCSS. And so I've got basically some mixins in every file with a dark and light to override the themes. And so if you come into here and I go to like, oops, that's the admin. Sorry. Let's go over here. And I can manually manage dark mode. And then I'm using the CSS media query selector for like prefers colors. Yeah, or whatever it is. So by default, if you prefer dark mode, you're going to get dark mode, but you can always override it. And so that's why I have all the mix-ins here. So basically that way I can override it both for the prefers as well as for, class, I think light or dark that I apply to the body element. I'm heavily using CSS variables. So it almost kind of feels like a little bit of a Tailwind, but not really. I get it. Like I'm still writing a lot of CSS. But in order to really formalize all of the styles, if I come down into here, I've got a file that I keep track of for all of my font sizing, font weights, font families, all the spacing, height, and width. And this is very similar. If you actually look at like Tailwind or something, when you do like MX2, MX3, that's what margin, x-axis 2, and you could see, very similar values. But this way I actually control the entire system. And that's just kind of what I wanted to come up with. And maybe I should have used Tailwind in retrospect. And then here's, I have theming. So, all kind of shades and I think these I actually pulled from material, like the material spec for all of the coloring. But that makes it easy to switch. If we come back to the app, I could go easily from dark mode to light mode and just toggling that class. So back in our button component, you're going to see here's a host selector, bunch of things. And then down here, I'm overriding, here's the overrides basically of colors for prefers color scheme for dark and light. And then a host context selector for dark or light. So it'll look if that body element has the dark or light class applied to it, and then apply the correct styling. And then this of course has to come kind of after this, so that way it overrides whatever your prefers color scheme is. Yeah.
Super nice. I definitely couldn't say it wasn't using a UI library, so that's good. I think it definitely looks coherent, which is most important thing if you use it. I thought you probably overwritten some existing style, because I also see the uniqueness, like having this thick, like 5 pixel border on a modal window, something you not frequently see, which I think is cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean,
had
I'm
it
not
in,
a designer, so I just kind of did what I thought looked cool, you know?
right.
So, yeah.
But I think one of the tricks you have there, and one of the things that I learned to appreciate by using Bootstrap in a more intelligent way, which is just not copying over a card, but thinking about what a card is and what it looks like, and you have padding at some places. So having these preset values, this is super useful for consistency. That your spacing is just, it's either like, what is it, 3M or 5M or 9M, but it's never going to be like some random value you come up with at that moment.
Right. Same with like widths. I mean, you're not going to have
Yeah.
a 10 here and a 5 there and a 25. They're all going to be very consistent, and it's all just structured out. And I do think, I know I've mentioned Tailwind many times, but I think that's one of the benefits of Tailwind is like they've built the structure for you, right?
Yep.
But I just kind of wrote my own structure, if you will, around things like the palette and the scaling, and just a couple overrides on like the base of like, you know, the body, and these kinds of things. And then I'm using, you know, heavily using obviously Angular. So like on a dialogue, you know, you've got title and content and actions and all of that. And so I'm using, you know, transclusion for all of that to make it happen, styling it. A few NG deeps here and there, I will admit. So, you know, just to kind of get in and modify some things. But yeah, so that's kind of the shared aspect of it. I mean, and then of course, you know, as you would expect, you know, most of the routes or modules, I suppose, are all, you know, lazy loaded. So that way we can minimize kind of the bundle weight for, you know, the main bundle and, you know, the shared bundle or whatever it's called. I forget. Yeah. And then from there, you know, I have kind of I like, this is my style. I know everybody's got different style, but I have kind of core things around constants, some data converters for transforming data between, like, you know, I have like comments and rule converters. There's the data source I started with, but I actually don't use that anymore. A bunch of enums, you know, guards around an admin side, a development guard, so I can kind of roll things out and play with them if I want. You know, guarding your drafts when you draft a rule, and guarding editing a rule so nobody can just edit your rules. And then I also have some pretty thorough Firestore or Firebase rules as well. So it's, even if you get around these guards on the client, you still can't modify somebody else's stuff, right? So I wanted to make sure that it was also to some extent, you know, kind of secure. So people couldn't muck with your stuff or post on your behalf or comments and stuff. So yeah. And then from there, I just go into kind of some of the features. And this is where I just, oops, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Decline. And that's where I get some features. Basically, this is where I split up all my modules. And then I generally follow like a container presenter pattern. So you'll see maybe in like profiles, here's all the routed containers, and then here's kind of some shared presenter components. So
looks pretty good. And I see the routes map one-on-one to the features. So this is something I really like to see. I think general best practice, lazy load everything. I think we briefly touched on it. UI shared lib might have a component per module. No, sorry, a module per component, which is something I move towards. And I really like it because it really allows you to fine grain whatever you pull into one module.
I'm actually not, just to clarify, I should be though, because you're right. In my components, I have basically one giant shared module. Right.
Yeah, which
so
I think how we start out, all of us.
Yeah, look at this. I mean, that's not great. I'll be honest. That's a lot of directives, you know, directives and components, right? And so I'm shipping all of that when you may not need it. So I probably should do some, you know, breaking this down a little bit more. So it's the commons chunk, right? So the commons chunk isn't so large. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, but I think at least like it's nice separated away, and it's great to have it here. It will take some time also to split it all up because now that you have this one shared module, there's only one that you have to include, and it works magically. And
Right.
this is something you will lose. And
Right.
I see myself at times copy pasting. I'm probably not the only one copy pasting modules and tweaking it. Let's say I have a rule list and then I want a rule detail. I quickly copy and paste it. The downside of having all these split up modules is you might have some leftover modules that you're importing, which you're not
Mm-hmm.
actually using.
Right.
And I really haven't found a way other than like being disciplined about this. But
I think it is a bit of discipline. I don't know if there's any sort of tooling around that, but it would be nice. But I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're importing a module into another module, like a feature module that's not necessary, it's not going to get tree shaken because it's going to see that, you know, the static analysis is going to see that import statement. And so even though you're not actually using it, you're still shipping that, right?
yeah,
So
it will download it.
yeah.
I want to briefly go back to the routing because there's a thing I haven't seen
Sure.
before. And so generally when I analyze apps, I tend to work with a lot of clients that either have issues with their Angular app or want to improve it or refactor it. First thing, my go-to place is routing. So to have an idea of what the base functionality is, you can see if the developer at least has some sense of how to optimize their apps. And I come across often apps that still just load components. So this is all good. Router service.with shell. I've never seen that thing. Is it something you built?
Yeah. So this with shell is just a static method in this router service class. And what this does is it'll wrap any of these routes in the app shell. So if I come over to here, so the app shell, so for example, when I share a knowledge, notice there's no app shell, right? So this is a route. This isn't a modal on top. It's not like I've layered. This is like, and I've seen some sites do this, maybe like if you use QuickBooks or something, they kind of throw a huge, like it almost like a full screen modal on top of the content, but this is not such, right? I mean, it's not like the homepage is still behind this, you know, this is an actual route. And so this doesn't have a shell. And so what I do is I have a kind of a like basically just this wraps, all it is a shell component. And then you just give it your basically your child routes and then any data. And all that does is you can see the path is empty string, so it doesn't matter. And it just wraps everything in a shell component. And then if you come into the shell component, you'll see here is basically the toolbar with a bunch of buttons. And then I have a shell and a content element. And then here's your router outlet. So that basically just provides the like really what I wanted is just the toolbar and this little bit of like responsiveness. But then from there, when I go into an actual here, you can see like my left column is gone, my right column is gone. And so it's almost like a different layout. And so I use a bunch of directives to accomplish that. And so if you come over to, let's look at that rules page actually. So if we come over to features and we go to rules, containers, a rule container, you'll see that I've got some directives. They're actually directives, even though they look like components, but I've got kind of a left column, some actions, which is if you can edit, you get like a little 3-dot thing. And then a header, the detail, the comments, and this is all wrapped inside of a content element. And LKT is my app, right? I used a custom one. So lookout, so LKT content. Right. And then here's actually a LKT not found component. And again, you know, I mentioned previously, I know we're getting to the top of the hour, but I mentioned like SEO is important. So if you come to if I go to like rule/foo, I want to actually send a 404 to Google. Right? I don't want Google to index this and it's just like a not found page, right? You need to actually use that. So if I come into like this not found, I'm going to, you know, optionally inject the express response object and actually set the status to 404 appropriately. So I kind of have almost like a little custom content type thing that I built around this, you know, where you have this idea of columns and actions, header. So if we come back over to here, you know, this is kind of the header. If I go to one of mine, you'll see the actions. So now I get this little actions menu. If I want to edit, right? And then here's your left column. There's no right column. And then there's like, here's your, you know, the comments and all of that. And then I wrap it in this content, which then gives you responsiveness as well. So if we come in here, kind of come over here. Some of the responsiveness I know is not perfect, and it's always kind of hard.
Yeah.
But I did try to make it as, I've got, some breakpoints. You can see here on a tablet, and then it goes out to a full width. Same thing if we come home, we're going to kind of shrink this down, drop off the right column, kind of keep shrinking. Then there goes the left column.
Yeah.
And I think the header, the logo is changing. If you see from like a nice wide logo, and then we drop this down, get rid of the share button, and the share button ends up down in here. Yeah. So I tried to make it mobile friendly as much as I could. I know that there's still some overflow. I've seen a couple of places where maybe it's not quite perfect. You can see here, like maybe this should be CSS Grid rather than Flexbox.
Yeah.
But I am using CSS Grid to accomplish all the layout in terms of the columns and all of that. And so it's kind of a custom little thing that I've built on top, in terms of the CSS and the directives and the layout. So
very, very cool. I'm definitely impressed with what you managed to pull off. I'm always into frameworks. I'm not a CSS guy. I know my way around CSS. I just really don't like it. And
right.
I often hear people when they hear me using Bootstrap, like, it's so easy. Like the things you do, I do it easily. And like personally, I don't see myself. I don't see it why. But when I see this and I see how you structure this, I definitely can see the appeal of it because it's all there. There's no black box. It's not if you do an upgrade that something falls off the screen suddenly.
Yeah.
And another thing I like what I see is that you say I'm using directives because, and this is something we discussed a few weeks back in the Angular Discord. Somebody asked, why should I use the directive? And my answer was, I actually never use them. And I think the answer is add behavior to a component without a template. So that was the simplest way I could basically explain what I think it is. Now, am I right that you're using it in combination with content projection?
That's correct. Yep. So I'll use a directive. Some of the directives I'm using are purely for content projection.
Right.
And so like, I guess what was it in the dialog here? If we look at this dialog component, I'm selecting, this is using attributes, but I do have, is LKT dialog title? Yeah. So here's a directive, LKT dialog title. And all I'm using this for is basically as a custom selector rather than, and maybe this, I don't know if this is good or bad. This is what I kind of went with. So it's actually not enhancing the behavior in any way, but it makes it so that way you've got a specific attribute that you're using. And you'll see this, like, for example, in like material, you have like a mat input directive, right?
Yeah.
And they do that rather than just selecting for the input element. So that way it's very, explicit in terms of what is the actual input, or in this instance, what actually is the title, rather than doing something like, selecting for all H1, header elements or something like this.
I think when I use content projection, mainly it is by class, and I come up with classes that make sense for that situation. So I would say I just give it a class, a div with a class .dialog title, and use that in my ng content and select it.
Yeah,
I think this
it's
is
perfectly
more,
acceptable.
Right, but this is probably more, how do you say it, expressive, that you're not, because this is at least not a class, so you're pretty sure that this is not going to enhance style. Instead, line 3,
correct.
Line 3 photo container, I assume that this will apply some style at some point. So I think it's probably clearer.
Yep.
And then if we can take a look at the template of the rules page, and I know we're topping the hour, but I'm not very strict. I think we can look at a few things more, and specifically if you have any things you like to share, let's definitely do that. If you don't have to run, that is.
Is this the one that you were thinking of? Yes.
So because what I see here is that you have a content element, component, or directive. You have LKT content, and inside this you have the left column, but then you have actions, header, rule detail, which is not particularly in the order it appears on the screen. So is this also done with ng content? Can I just assume that this app is heavy on ng content and basically projecting where you want to see the stuff?
Correct. So if we look in the LKT content, we go to this template, here you can see again, a lot of projection. This is where I'm, oops, I don't want to hit that. This is where I'm grabbing the left column, right? This is basically the main content area. I wrap it in a main. Here's the ng content. So this has no selector on it. So it's just going to grab all of that content. So for the, in the rules page, that was like the rule details, the comments, the bio, the comments, kind of that main section. And then here's this right column as well.
Very cool. Very interesting to see how you do it. I really like this.
It's unique, I think, and then here's the, here's these actions that kind of come in here as well. So if we go back to the app, let's see, just get rid of this. If I go back to one of the ones I did, this is going to bring in the header. This is your left column. Here's all your content below it. And then here's kind of the actions that get put in there. And then of course, back on the home page, you've got a left and a right. And then basically I think I'd have to double check. I wrote this a while ago. Yeah. So here's your breakpoints where I'm basically, again, I kind of rolled it all on my own. And maybe some people are looking at this going, man, why'd you do that? Why did you just use something like Tailwind? I don't know. Okay.
Tailwind with
I'm
more
crazy.
steps.
Yeah.
In your defense, I think a year ago when you started this, April 2019, Tailwind wasn't where it was today.
No, it wasn't. I didn't hear about Tailwind until last summer or fall, I think. Right. And even then, sometimes you hear, like, oh, interesting, but certainly now, by December 2020, I think Tailwind has gained a lot of momentum, and I think it's incredibly powerful. And their docs are great, and all of the above. But you could see here, I'm doing like, CSS grid and everything to get it all to be responsive and all of this. And down here is some breakpoints, and so yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. I'm definitely impressed with what I see. It looks very well thought out.
Yeah, I think maybe I've told a couple people, like, I've been working on this for over a year, and they're like, oh my gosh, a year? And I was like, yeah, but I think I probably could have, like, put it out there 6 months or even more ago, but I wanted, whatever I put out there, I wanted it to be in at least some sort of like a real true, like, a viable, maybe MVP, maybe it's a little more than an MVP, but I wanted the SEO. I wanted the Twitter cards. I wanted, 404s. I wanted to make sure that it was consistent. I wanted responsive. I wanted dark mode. I wanted light mode. These were a couple of, for me, I felt like these were, if you're going to launch something and people are going to start using it, if you launch it and it's just kind of done, I don't want to say half-assed, but pardon the French, but if it's just kind of like, here's something, you didn't kind of take some time to think through it, maybe it won't stick. And so I'm really hoping that because I've been diligent in some of this stuff, that it'll have a little bit more stickiness. So
very cool. Yeah, you definitely can see you put love in this, and that's definitely cool. Also, I think like it's very easy to look at an app and say, oh, I could implement this in X time with Y framework. But you're passing a whole lot of like innovation that you have to do. I mean, people can say a simple idea, but you still have to think about it, do it, make decisions, set up the Firebase, anything. There's a lot of decisions to be made. Whereas somebody would pay me and say, make me a copy of lookout.dev. I can probably do a fair job, at least with the UI, like maybe in a day, and like have it work responsive, use Tailwind, like you said, and copy paste whatever you did. So basically take all your innovation, copy it in, but that's not where this year of work goes in. So if you have some more time, I would love to look at your functions. If we can take a look at, if you have some interesting
sure. But
I
did want to point out go ahead.
No, you wanted to say something as well, so please go ahead.
Oh, just real quickly, I also wanted like the tagging to have like, kind of this nice look around it. If I go to all tags, I just wanted it to look like, these are missing a background color. But I wanted to have kind of this, I'm keeping track of the counts and the metadata and all of this. So, yeah, but let's switch over. What is it that you wanted to look at? I forget.
Functions. I'm curious.
Oh, yeah, the functions.
Yeah, so that's basically your backend. And
Yeah.
everything that's not data related or not directly data access related probably lives in your functions.
Yeah. And so, so I'm using Firebase functions, as you can see, Node version 12 with them. I actually just updated this all, I think, about a couple weeks ago. So it's pretty latest version of Firebase functions and Firebase admin and such. And so I wish I could give the person credit, but I had read a blog article around, well, what if I want to write my TypeScript, my functions in TypeScript? And I know there's some docs, I believe, on the Firebase site in terms of using TypeScript for your functions. But I personally really like TypeScript. I like what it provides me. And so what I do is I've got basically a source directory with a bunch of my TypeScript files. So I've got some utils, but really here's the auth. So when you create and delete an authentication, and then let's just look maybe here at like rules. Here's an on create, an on delete, and on update. And what I do is, I got to remember where I wrote this, but I basically have, I think it's this index.ts maybe. Yeah. And so what I'm doing is I'm basically looking for all of these like star.f files.
Yeah.
Or maybe this is where it actually gets deployed. I apologize. I did write this a while ago. But basically I wrote a little automation around this where once I do these and then I do an npm build or whatever, I'll end up with in my libs directory, here's these same like on create file, right? Or for rules on create, on delete, on update. And then if we come back over to my Firebase console, here's those same DB rules on delete. So it's kind of dynamically creating all of the default export functions and deploying those all up to Firebase functions. So if we just look at like, let's look at on create. And some of these I wrote a while ago, so it might be right. So I'm also using Algolia for doing this, the search. That's what kind of drives the search. So every time you obviously update a rule, create a rule, or delete a rule, I need to sync that with Algolia with the index. And so that's what I'm doing in here. So here's kind of the default function. Anytime we create a rule, I'm going to go ahead and I think update some stuff. Right, I need to generate a unique slug. So when you create a rule, if we come back here and we look at like this one, I've got to generate out this unique slug here. And so I used a thing called, I think, Slugify or something like that to basically create a slug. But I also need to kind of recursively check or, that it's actually unique. And so I'll do that and then maybe up to a certain point, or I'll just start adding numbers at the end or something like that, just to make sure that they're all unique. So some work has to be done around that. There's some metadata that I'm tracking, some counts that I'm tracking. So eventually, right now, you can't really see how many like lookouts somebody has, but in the future, I want to be able to kind of track and provide you with a dashboard. So when you log in as yourself, it'd be nice to see how many views I'm getting on my lookouts, how many lookouts I've posted, all these kinds of things. So I do have a little bit of stuff around counting for your how many times you post something and how many times I keep track of like how many times a tag is added, updated index. Here's the kind of fun one that I mentioned where I actually create the open graph image. And so, I've got I think this is like a util function that I wrote, which uses Canvas. So it's going to use Canvas to basically generate a JPEG via Node, and then I'll deploy that out to a storage bucket.
Storage buckets. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. So there is a bit of tediousness in terms of like, even for example, like last week, I think, or something like that, I rolled out the update where you can actually update your own profile name, right? So if I go to update profile, now I can have a username. And I like sat down one night, my wife is like, oh yeah, go ahead, you work on your project. And I sat down to like start this. And it was a little bit more tricky than you think, right? Because I had to do all kinds of things like you can't make it too short. It can't conflict with anything that I already have, like rules, right? Or admin, right? It's got to be unique. So I don't know what somebody else is, but let's say somebody else already had one. I've got to do an async validator, right? In order to check the uniqueness of it. And then I guess because I'm a little old school, like I never trust the client. So whenever you actually update your username, I further verify that it's unique, right?
Sure.
And so even if you figure out how to get around the UI, which you probably could, right, and send it off, I'm not going to allow it, right? Because then that would cause like havoc if two people had the same username, right? And so I do a lot of verification on the back end too, as you probably should, just to make sure that, I've always, maybe it's kind of old school, but I've always been told like, don't trust the client, right?
No, totally agree.
So,
but I'm probably as old school, so that might make sense. But no, definitely, yeah. You want to guarantee that the backend doesn't do this. And also, I think if at some point, maybe this app is not the app, but if at some point you want to add a mobile front end for it, you want it at least to behave the same at the backend. Even if you forget, like, oh, I'm not doing this check in the mobile app because it's hard. At least you want to give them an error and to say something is not working as expected.
Yeah.
I really like, so one of the reasons I asked about the structure of the Firebase functions is it, like if you scaffold out the base project, it doesn't do a really great job in predicting how you want to do this. And I've worked with the exact same structure. We probably read the same blog post about this. Yeah. Some hero out there, the unknown hero, unsung hero, that helped us both out. I really like what they did with this structure. I'm very much, I come from a database and like ops and server background before I started into coding. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's always a bit hard to work on a real project with a cloud database. I should probably do it more and more often. But this was definitely one of the nuggets I found there that made working with Firebase functions way easier and making them manageable.
Right.
So that's definitely great.
Right. I agree. And it took a little bit of effort to put this all together, right? It didn't just happen. But I like it now because now, let's say I add a new Firestore, what is it called? A collection, right? I could just add a new folder and then I'll just create a new thing called onCreate.f.ts, export default function, blah, 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 on create. And then I just do npm build, done, right? And then I have an npm run deploy, and then it just sends up all the functions and updates them. And so kind of a little bit of automation around, I know this is like a side project, but I still wanted to kind of take it seriously and make it easy for long term. Because I do hope to maintain this and build this out, in the future. Something I'm kind of personally committed to doing. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
If there's anything else you want to show, let's please show us.
I think that's about it. The other thing, certainly around the SEO thing too, while I'm looking here, I wanted to have a sitemap, right? And put it into, Google Search Console. So that way when you go to, and I could tell Google or whatever and go to sitemap.xml. Not sure how fast it is. Maybe it could be faster, but here's the sitemap that's getting generated for all of the lookouts, right? And so there should probably be a little caching or something around this, I imagine. But I did want to make, these were things that I was very like, no, this is something I want to, that's important to me, again, around the discoverability. So that way when you write a lookout, it doesn't just go off into some dark hole that's not going to ever show up in a Google search or you can't share online or anything like that. And so there is, I am building out a full, and I use some, node library called sitemap, and I gzip it up and stuff. And so that was something I don't know. I like it. I think it's fun. I like to have, it's a full working real app project. This isn't just, a to-do app or whatever. Yeah. So, yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to ask a question. Hope you don't mind asking it because it might make you feel uncomfortable. I hope it don't. Are you considering open sourcing it at some point? It was one of the questions that I was asked when I said I had you as a guest.
Yeah, no, that is a good question. And I have thought about it. It's just not right now. I'm not ready. You know what I
Okay.
mean? So potentially in the future, I know like dev.to, I think is open source. I think there's
Yeah.
obviously WordPress is open source, a lot of other things. But like right now I've got credentials, hopefully I didn't share any of them. Right. But I've got like admin credentials in the app and
Yeah.
all of these types of things. So it would take some work. But I guess the answer is I've thought about it. I don't know what I'm going to do, but right now it is not open source. So it's not like you can submit a PR against this. I'm just not ready to, I don't have contribution guidelines. I don't, so we'll see. Maybe potentially one day in either all the way or in some sort of form, kind of see where it goes. But I appreciate the question because I think it is a valid question.
Very cool. The person asked me, he's definitely interested in contributing and also I want to see how Brian built this. So I think you gave us a great overview. I really like how you showed us how you built the UI. It's definitely, I'd say piece of art. I've seen various things I haven't done at this way. So thanks for that takeaway. The takeaways there. If you ever want to look at building it inside a NX workspace, I'm there to help. I can do this. I'm even sporting the Narwhal t-shirt because I'm a huge fan of NX. I'm NXing all the time. No, I'm also doing some projects. I generally, if I want to experiment something quickly, I generally spin up an ng new, just a plain old ng new. But if I have the idea, like I'm going to work on this, and this is going to be one of my children, one of my pet projects, I'm definitely spinning up NX. So if at any point you want to look at this, we can do it off camera, on camera. We could have you on stream and just look at how we'd rebuild it in NX. And the same goes for Form. I'm a big fan of Formly. I assume you're not using Formly in this app, and
so I am not. Though I know we actually had you on the podcast, right, around Formly. No, I'm not using Formly. I am kind of. I mean, even if I go into some of the presenter components, like profile, presenter, user profile, you're going to see, it's a little bit, some of it's a bit complicated because you're actually, it's dynamic based on like this, I have enums that are building out like your social and stuff. Right. Oh no, this is actually not the form though. Where's the form? Profiles. Oh, it's under users. I'm sorry. This is what I wanted to show you. Yeah, you're going to see, this, for example, right? Which if you're used Angular material, I like their structure. Basically, I have like a wrapper, a label, and then an input. And so, yeah, I'm not using Formly, though I do like Formly, but I just kind of went with this, kind of old school, right out the form approach. So.
Yeah, but the offer is there. If you ever want to look at it, I think it makes for great content for the channel. So, and it's a nice use case. It's different than what I come up with, which is the other Hello World or To-Do app, which we'll know. So, these are just things we can look at. I think we're going to wrap it up with that. Is there anything you want to share or plug or?
I don't think so. The only thing that I would say is, you can certainly follow me on Twitter. I'm at Brian_Love. My DMs are open. If you got any feedback, check those out. I don't know if I'm pointing in the right direction. And if you need any sort of what you saw today and you're like, oh, wow, this person knows what they're doing. If you need some consulting help, I have my own consulting company, and you can go to liveloveapp.com and you can find out more about what I offer there. I've got a free day Angular architecture review where I'll spend 4 hours looking at your source code. And I actually came up with a whole list. I've done some architecture reviews for several companies, and I do a paid architecture review, which I've got about 120 checkpoints that I check in your source code. But the free one, I just do like the top 20 things and just simple things that maybe you're already doing, like, am I doing track by functions? Am I lazy loading modules? Am I, splitting things out? Do I have services? How am I structuring my app? Could I be using something like NGRX or Component Store or whatever it is? And so you can hit me up over there too if you're interested in getting some help.
Awesome. Definitely, if I'm having a project can pick it up, definitely going to send them over, because I tend to do this when I take up new clients. I do an analysis and it basically takes 2 or 3 hours. I think it's super valuable. I basically do it just like from whatever I see. I don't have any guidelines. So
Yep.
Awesome. liveloveapp.com URL is down there. And
Cool.
with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much
Cool.
for
Thanks,
being
Bram.
here.
Yeah, it was a
Awesome
pleasure.
having you. And everybody, I hope to see you soon. Most likely this Friday, I will be online with Chow Tran, and we're going to look at Component Store. So we're going to do some work with that. So that'll be it. And I hope to see you all soon. Bye-bye.